Hey everyone, quick heads up before we dive in here. We had a few streaming glitches during this recording, some brief audio and video dropouts. We patched things up with a little AI magic. So if Sean Malinowski, my guest here today, looks or sounds slightly different in a few moments, that explains it. But trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Dr. Sean Malinowski from the Policing Lab brings just incredible insight into how data, AI, and real-time technology are transforming policing, public safety, and even how autonomous systems fit into the future of law enforcement. So buckle up, stick with it. A few minor tech hiccups aside, this is a conversation you definitely don't want to miss. Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Sean, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join here today. I just want to start out with a scenario.
Okay.
I'm imagining a police officer responding to a call in, a neighborhood that might have some crime, but they've got an AI-powered command center in their car, autonomous driving backup, real-time intelligence streaming, even before they step out. And that's not too far from science. That's not really science fiction. It's kind of what we're approaching here today and some of the work that you've been pioneering and pushing forward. So what do you think of that scenario? Are we far away from something like that, or is that like at our doorstep?
No, we're not far away from it. And there are vendors out there right now that are providing AI digital assistance to officers en route to calls. And we'll have one of those at our opening for the PUG vehicle. But they do have information coming from the real-time crime center, but there's the human in the loop there. When these systems come online with artificial intelligence, they'll be able to have a conversation about the call as they're responding. And what I like about autonomy is the vehicle being autonomous frees the officer up from driving responsibilities because they have a lot of other responsibilities. They need to communicate on the radio. They're typing things on the computer. They're distracted drivers, and unfortunately, we have more accidents than the general public, probably because responding to emergencies, but also the fact that they have so many responsibilities in the vehicle.
Amazing. I mean, and now you've had a long career here. You've been the LAPD Chief of Detectives, 25-year plus career, Fulbright Scholar, PhD and sort of the related activities of what you do, inducted into the Evidence-Based Policing Hall of Fame. And we've met because of our sort of engagement with, as we'll talk more about, the PUG vehicle with your Policing Lab organization, which is amazing, bringing autonomy into these police-grade Ford Explorers and other vehicle platforms. And I'm just thankful for you to be here and take the time to talk about this today. It's a topic that we've not covered on the podcast series yet, is how automation and AI can help, policing, can bring, force protection, adds, safety to communities and what have you. So thank you for being here today. And let me know, is there anything I've left out of your long career? I know you did some stuff with the Chicago Police Department as well. So
no, that was great. I appreciate it. And Paul, I've enjoyed partnering with you. I just called you out of the blue, as you know, over a year ago. And after being exposed during a trip on real-time crime centers to San Francisco and seeing vehicles driving robo-taxis out there and having this idea of, well, couldn't we use that technology in policing? And then, it's been a great research and development process with you and your folks since then to see how we can leverage that technology to make people safer, both the officers and the people in the community.
Yeah. And so I guess I before this podcast, I did a quick sort of history lesson for myself on just the history of policing in the U.S. Like the first police department, I guess, was in Boston in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And of course, prior to that, we had, sheriffs and night watch. And I guess London was maybe the first official sort of police agency, I guess, for the public, good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but LAPD is up there as one of the largest, maybe I guess the third largest in the country. And you served there for over 25 years. What drew you into policing, into this? Is it something that dates back to the early days when, or something later in life that kind of drew you towards the force?
Yeah, for me, it was later in life. I know there's a lot of people that grew up wanting to be a police officer. My mother told me an anecdote. We were watching a show called Police Surgeon, and I said, I like that job, a police surgeon. Then you could, if you injure the guy, you could be the guy fixing him. It's a great job, police surgeon. And we do have police surgeons. But no, I didn't have an aspiration when I was a kid. I went right into advertising and marketing, and I think you might be able to see it in some of the things that we share about this vehicle. But while I was doing that in advertising, and that's what I was trained to do in school, I did some pro bono work on an anti-drunk driving campaign. And really what happened is I was exposed to police officers and particular individual police leaders. And I just decided at that young age, I want to be like these guys. I want to be on that path, do something meaningful. And so I left advertising and got my education in criminal justice, and then eventually ended up coming on with the Los Angeles Police Department, which is the best thing I could have done in terms of the training and the exposure they gave me.
And what year did you start there at, in LAPD?
June 1994 class.
Okay. All right. And you just, I guess, retired, what would that be?
In 2019.
2019. Okay.
Once when I hit
just before COVID kind of set in. So that was interesting timing. I guess it was a different period, post-COVID, pre-COVID. Yeah.
Yes, I went right in 2019. I had been working for several years. Our chief, Charlie Beck, had allowed me to be on loan to the Chicago police for a period of time when they had a huge spike in violence. And we were building these strategic decision support centers, which are command and intelligence hubs that are outfitted with technology and a process to do a better job on making sure we have cops in the right place at the right time. And so after that, I stayed with Chicago. I was there from 2019 for the next 3 or 4 years, and we were fighting crime in Chicago. And so I was involved during COVID with Chicago, and the remarkable things that the officers were able to do. First of all, they all showed up for work every day. They had no idea what they were facing in terms of COVID itself, but they showed up and they risked their lives throughout that process, really not knowing. And then in the aftermath of that, they risked their lives again during the civil unrest. So I wasn't in LAPD at the time, but I certainly saw up close the kind of heroism that was exhibited by the Chicago Police Department.
Yeah, and in LA, I guess it's like 4 million some people. 4 or 500 square miles of coverage. That's a large swath of land and people to assist. I guess how did that shape your thinking about how technology can help, AI or automation help with policing in such a large geographic area with so many people?
Well, I think the thing that I was fortunate, I came on the Los Angeles Police Department, and about the time, a little after when I made sergeant, the former New York City Police Commissioner Bill Bratton came and became police chief in Los Angeles during a reform when we were under a consent decree. And I was fortunate enough to meet Chief Bratton and ended up working directly for him as his executive officer. I had about 3 or 4 years of a front row seat of about how to run a police department in a very professional way. And Commissioner Bratton is still active. He's the only person that's been, he was police commissioner of the Boston Police, the oldest police department. He was twice commissioner, 2 different eras of the New York City Police Department. And he was police chief in Los Angeles. And actually, they really wanted him also to be the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London at one time. So this is a person that I was able to learn from directly. And I just talked to him 5 minutes ago before we came on the call. He's very much involved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's very much involved in this new project, which gives me instant credibility in policing if I was able to convince Chief Bratton that this is a good idea.
Wow. Well, he's a living legend and just an amazing human being.
Yes. He changed the face of policing. And I often wanted to get together with some of my mathematics people and try to figure out how many lives were saved based on the things that he started back in 1994. And it's really a significant change, and you can see it in the numbers in terms of crime and violence and shootings, just because he changed the orientation. And so that's I was fortunate to get exposed to Chief Bratton, and he let me experiment. He let me work on the Real-Time Crime Center. He let me work on forecasting crime. And he let me set up a consortium with UCLA and other universities to bring in the best minds to try to use technology to get the most out of our officers, because we only had 10,000 officers in LA. Sounds like a lot, but there's 4 million people, 465 square miles. It's a thin blue line out there in LA, and it's amazing what they've been able to do. And now they're down to about 8,000. So it's more important now than ever that we get technology that can act as a force multiplier to keep people safer and to do things more efficiently.
So LA has Hollywood, I assume, within its auspices.
Yes.
and other coastal regions, and just a diverse lot of folks who are living amazing lives. And so, like, any interesting sort of anecdotes or stories or about challenges or things that just stand out in your mind as something to tell the grandkids one day?
Oh, there's so many accumulate over 25 years, and I'm sure my children have heard them all. My son's applying to police department right now. He's taking his physical agilities test as we speak. So they've heard all those stories. But yeah, Los Angeles is a unique place in that you have people who are at the very low end of the socioeconomic sphere, and then you also have people at such a high end, and sometimes they're often in close proximity to each other. And so one day you could be dealing with somebody who has no means and is down on their luck, and they're at Venice Beach as a homeless person. And then the same day you could be dealing with somebody who is a high-powered agent for James Caan or someone. So right. It really does test you. You have to go into things as a police officer there ready for anything and not impressed by anything. Because people will throw their supposed clout around in those environments. So I think a lot of the challenge in Los Angeles is the diversity of neighborhoods that we have. So what we try to do is take the data when we were there and customize it to that area, so that the people working that area were briefed up not on citywide trends, but on what's happening in their particular division or district. And that helped us. And then we got to the point where we were able to forecast crime, and so that we could put assets in place before crimes occurred. And it's not like in a Minority Report way. We're not looking for individuals. We just know conditions persist in a certain area that put it at high risk for crime. And then the idea is we know that police presence will deter criminal activity, or at least disrupt it. So a person who's out there trying to caper will see the police and decide, okay, I'm not going to operate today. And that's all I need, is to disrupt that crime from occurring.
Gotcha. And was there a sort of, in doing this hotspot analysis or whatever you may call it, was it leveraging AI yet, or was this sort of what we have today with the AI tools?
Well, we used algorithms to analyze crime trends and then to forecast based on, Hotspots does an accumulation of events and tells you, okay, here's in a 3D model from red down to white. where the crimes have occurred. And so we're able to put an algorithm on top of that to say, and based on the conditions in the next 24 hours, here's where we would expect that crime to occur. And there's all different ways of doing it. Risk terrain modeling has really proven out to be one of the best ways, where they take a lot of different data from crime data and try to map out what areas are most at risk for property crimes, let's say for burglary. And then we know that when a burglary occurs, the houses around that location are at a heightened risk for the next 2 weeks. That is proven out in statistics. And when you think about it, it's because the burglar was successful in that area, and houses tend to be the same. And maybe there's something they didn't get. That house itself is much more elevated of getting burglarized again. So we use that kind of knowledge from the academic studies to apply to law enforcement. And then we try to put cops in the right place at the right time. And it was very successful for us in Los Angeles. We had driven crime down significantly using those tools.
Right. And I guess with like GPS location of where, officers and vehicles might be, was there sort of an aha moment where you saw sort of a disparity, and that helped kind of push, where folks were over to where maybe they should be at certain times of day? Or
well, that is great. This is why I love talking with you, Paul. I mean, that's something that I've tried to explain to numerous departments. What we need to do is figure out where is crime most likely to occur, and where have our officers been spending their time. Many times you'll find that they don't overlap. So we have developed a system where you can see a heat map in red where crime is likely to occur, and a heat map in blue that shows you where your officers are spending their time. And what we try to do is get it to be purple, So you want the blue to overlap with where the red is, so that I have coverage during that time. And you laid it out exactly how I would explain it to someone. Let's make sure that if we know an event is going to occur, that we have coverage. And many times the officers are using intuition based on their one shift or something that struck them as significant. And the algorithm doesn't have that bias. The algorithm can show us exactly where we need to be. And that's what we're excited about with autonomy. Also, the GPS can show us exactly where the officer or the unmanned vehicle has been, and we can route that vehicle based on risk. And the machine is much better at just following those directions. Officers get called away on calls. They get distracted on other things. They get bored. Let's have the machine do the things that the machine is suited to do. So we free up officers to do the things that humans are best at doing, which is dealing with people and solving problems for them.
Right. So I guess the concept there would be sending out an automated vehicle ahead of, an officer or officers in vehicles to go into a particular area. And when it gets there, I guess, what would this vehicle do?
I think what you're getting at, Paul, on this is, so the question is, what we have to separate is what would we be using the vehicle for? And it's not so much about response. There will be certainly situations where this vehicle will be a patrol partner. So as you know, because you designed the robotics on it, we have level 3 where you would have an officer in the vehicle freed up from driving and available to take information in a much more detailed way than they can do as when they're driving. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. And we're designing some things to make use of that windshield for a heads-up display that can display for the officer what is going on in the neighborhood as they're driving through it. So that's one thing. And then if you did have something happen, like if there was a suspect running or a perimeter, I think that the vehicle with its drone capability, it has a tethered drone that can go up 150 feet. That gives us some sort of overwatch and an ability to relay to responding officers the situational awareness they need. So there's that. But then on level 4, which we won't get to probably for some time after we're testing it, and we'll need teleoperations. In level 4, you can imagine the vehicle being out in the wee hours of the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, without a driver, responding on its own based on a route that we use risk terrain modeling or some other forecast model to put it in the right place at the right time, and then alerting somebody back at a real-time crime center of the activity that they see. So if we have somebody stealing catalytic converters out of vehicles, we have this unmanned sensor vehicle driving down the street, can pick up on a heat signature under a vehicle, know that that's an anomaly, and alert the police. So that's something we've never had before. We've never had the ability to have an extension of the real-time crime center out there in the environment, collecting license plates, looking for anomalies, and then reporting that back to the real-time crime center and to other officers, kind of as a partner with sensors.
Yeah. And you're talking about like, L4 in sort of maybe urban areas where there might be more, pedestrians and vulnerable, users around, but like this could also be sent to areas that are, quasi controlled, like campuses, business parks, parking lots of malls and loading docks and things like that, like sooner rather than later, like now, because those are much more controlled areas, and maybe that could offload some of the recon necessary for officers. If I guess you could send them into those areas, because that could be done like today, right? I mean,
yes, and in fact, it's interesting you say that. I've talked to, and I don't want to mention the departments because we're just in discussions, but I've talked to some major departments. That's why they want to start first. They want to say, I've got this park that is, X number of acres or miles square, and I have roads in there, and I spend time having officers patrol in this area. And wouldn't it be great if I could get a roving unmanned asset to do that for me and just alert me when I have something through some video analytics? And I think it's especially for retail sector. We know that in the retail theft business, the prevention of that, a lot of it has to do with someone being aware, suspect being aware that someone is aware of them being in the store. So that's why Walmart has a greeter a lot of times. They want to make people feel comfortable in the store, but they also want to let potential suspects know there's a credible guardian here, that is aware of you. And so there are ways of doing that using this vehicle. I think what we'll see in the future, and it could be the near future, is certain big box stores tying their resources together, sending an L4 vehicle out there that can patrol those areas for them, and then alert the authorities to what's happening. And they don't have that ability right now. They have maybe a pickup truck with amber lights on it that does a route once in a while. It's not much of a deterrent. What I'm talking about is a fully marked, full-size Ford Explorer police vehicle that is a police, connected to the police department and makes people aware, okay, this area is being monitored not just by a security company, but by direct link to the police. And then we have all kinds of sensors on the vehicle to collect license plates. We know that there are organized crime or organized retail theft rings that operate up and down the East Coast, and many times they're using the same vehicles. And a lot of that, we're just getting word of mouth between the retailers. Wouldn't it be great if we could capture that information? When I see 2 or 3 of these vehicles coming into the Target parking lot, if I could alert Target that, hey, listen, you may have an organized retail theft problem. I've notified my partner police officers, and they'll be responding.
Yeah, and certainly, people and or vehicles in certain places at certain times of night, where you could raise some sort of alarm or alert. That's all doable, and sending the automated vehicle into such a place again makes that gives you maybe a bigger footprint to be able to do it. What are some of the ISR technologies that and let's explain the name PUG and or if you don't mind, or what Policing Lab is doing with the sort of the ISR stack and what that means, what ISR means for those of us who are newer to this, and like the kind of sensors that are on there that get information that can that can provide this kind of surveillance and security assessment?
Yes. So some of the things that we're developing in the policing lab, and the policing lab is a nonprofit that is operational for the last several years. And what we do is we're able to take money from philanthropy and from grants and apply that to improving technology and practices in local police departments. And so one of the things we try to do is innovate. And so on the innovation front, the idea is to build an ISR stack or an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance stack of sensors onto the vehicle. And those are fairly ubiquitous in terms of license plate recognition cameras. They're out there and being used. But we also have 360-degree video. We have thermal for low light. Of course, the LiDAR that we're using for the robotics is very robust in terms of 3D mapping of an environment and things like that. So I talked to a police department yesterday, and they're interested in maybe chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear sensors on the vehicle, which I think is a great idea because, that way we have a vehicle unmanned going into a hot zone to see how hot it is and providing us with not just that data, but also video. We could also outfit the vehicle with audio sensors. And so there's some studies about that and how a vehicle could, in that scenario, pick up on glass breaking, for instance, in a downtown district and alert someone. So anything that's an anomaly in the environment, we train the system to recognize what's normal and what's not. And that's what police officers are doing. Frankly, when they're driving around in the middle of the night, they're saying, okay, why is this car parked in the middle of the road with the flashers on? Why are all the lights on this street broken out? Something might be going on. We know from our knowledge and experience, and it's done in our brain, this doesn't look right. What could it mean? The machine is, or the vehicle is, and the system behind it is much better at recognizing those anomalies. So you can imagine in a perimeter, for instance, of a fence line. So you mentioned loading docks and things. We can teach the system what it's supposed to look like. You're supposed to have this level of lighting. You're supposed to have a secure perimeter, and this is what the fence line looks like. And the vehicle would take pictures of that or video of that every day. And then the AI would compare that to previous images and say, oh, no, we have a breach. We have a breach in the perimeter. And they could report that. And they could report, the scenario of all the lights being off on the west side of the parking lot. That's something that might go unattended for days or weeks. And what we would do then is immediately send in a work order to get that fixed and alert the police that, listen, you have a vulnerability over here. You got a bunch of high-end vehicles and you have no lighting. And so that really increases our ability to forecast potential critical incidents and then put resources on it quicker to correct those anomalies.
And is there the equivalent, like with stereo cameras, you have a fixed baseline and you can sort of know where something is and the distance to it. Are there like acoustic equivalents where you have, where you can localize where like a gunshot might come from and then train the camera and or sensors on that?
Yeah, so the acoustic sensors are getting more and more sophisticated from gunshot detection systems. And usually those systems triangulate on a sound of a gunshot. But for our purposes, we just want to hear the gunshot. And then if we do have gunshot detection, get much more specific about where that happened. But even in areas where you don't have a gunshot detection system, just hearing that round go off and letting AI tell us, is that gunfire or is it something else? And alerting officers to it is the thing. One application is when there is a critical incident like a shooting or something that occurs, all of the resources tend to respond there in terms of police response. So what that does is it leaves other areas vulnerable. But this vehicle would not respond. So during times when there's a critical incident, there'll be someone else watching the rest of the district. And that's something I think that is attractive. And watching it in a way that is much more sophisticated in terms of the sensory ability of the system compared to a human who is distracted by driving and talking on the radio and entering information on a computer. When we drive around in this vehicle, we can look around and we can make assessments of what we're seeing. And I think we're going to pick up on a lot of things we didn't used to pick up on.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess also the combination of this kind of vehicular technology with drones. I mean, you could have a roof full of 5 or whatever drones that can come, recharge, take off, and sort of cover a broader area from the vantage point of sort of the roving vehicle as well. And the vehicle becomes like a charging base as well as, having all this technology that you mentioned.
Yes, there's a lot out there on that right now, Paul. That is an emerging area because of drone as a first responder. Many of these vendors have put nests on top of buildings, and those are very important. And they are saving, in many instances, 25% of the radio calls are being responded to by a drone, and the drone can say, no, I don't need a response. That's a huge savings. What it doesn't have is the mobility. And so they're responding to a call. They have about 25 to 30 minutes of battery time. We have a tethered drone that has continuous power. But we're also, I have a project right now where we're designing a vehicle for a police department that will have two small drone nests on it. And then you'll be able to charge those and swap batteries. And so I can have one drone up, untethered. It's starting to run low on battery. I can send the other drone up to replace it. The vehicle is mobile, so then it opens up the whole city to you, because I'm basically following my drones around and launching a new one. So that kind of mobility, I think, is going to be an asset. I think it's great, and we really should expand on the drone as a first responder from rooftops, but I think it should be combined into a mesh with some mobile units as well. And I see some departments going in that direction. So many applications when you start thinking about it. I mean, and there's other AI things that we're going to try to do. I don't know how much I should. I could just tell you about it. I mean,
we're being recorded, so whatever you want to say,
I can say it. We're working on a thing called Crime Central, which is developing AI agent-driven crime briefing. So, in addition to trying to get officers to be in the right place at the right time, I need them to be fully informed about what's happening, specifically during the 8 or 10 hours they're working in the part of the city that they're working. And that's what we do when we build these little command centers. It's like in Chicago, when we built those SDSCs, a lot of the publicity was around the technology involved. But the real innovation there, sure, we use technology, and that was the media story a lot of times, but the real innovation was process. How are we preparing officers and supervisors with the most information we can based on data to do the best job they can in the field? And that story I still see in departments today. We try to get information out to the right person at the right time. And so this Crime Central, what it does for us is the AI agents will go collect the data out of databases, various databases that we have. They will construct a script. Another agent writes that script up based on the analysis, and then turns that into a podcast. So using avatar voices so that we can brief people on, you couldn't do it with humans, because like Los Angeles Police Department, you have 21 divisions and you have at least three watches, right? So you couldn't produce that many 63 videos every day, plus one for the commander and one for the chief. AI allows us to produce these just because of the volume of it. And it's so much more specific. I'm getting what's happening during the PM hours in Pacific Division, not what's happening in the larger area or what's happening throughout the city, just where I am at, what kind of activity, what kind of suspects are out there. And so it's very specific. So we're working on that. We're excited about that. We're working on other things to tie together AI with the vehicle, with the autonomous vehicle for organized retail theft, where we would have a thing called a node, which is basically we know from research that a visible presence is preventing crime. And even if that visible presence is a cardboard cutout, there's research that has in retail locations that had a cardboard cutout of a police officer, theft was reduced significantly. So we want to use an image of an officer, either an avatar or something like that, to interact at the storefront and to interact with our vehicle in the parking lot to let people know, listen, this area is being monitored. Let the customers know that they're safe walking to their car, that they're safe coming in and out of the store. And so all of these things are going to come together into kind of an ecosystem out in the field to, reduce the fear of crime, but also increase our ability to respond to the crime even before the crime occurs. So that's some of the stuff that I think is exciting that's in the offing.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, how generative AI will transform every industry is obviously an expansive topic, but with respect to policing and just other applications of things that you do, search and rescue, whatever it may be, it's going to have a dramatic impact.
I think a lot of what people are doing, or what they have been doing, is rescuing people in the desert. There are people that are left there by traffickers, and a lot of the surveillance technology that's used is to find those people before they die from exposure. And so we're looking for ways to outfit an unmanned vehicle with search and rescue capability. So out in the far stretches of the desert, a vehicle could be out there looking for signs of life, either with the drone or with the other sensors, and then responding there with water, with food, with GPS, so they can guide in a helicopter. I mean, when you think about not just enforcement, but the life-saving capability of using an unmanned that you can run nearly 24/7, that except for refueling or recharging is available to be out there patrolling. We don't really have that capability unless we're willing to pay a lot of money in personnel costs. And so I think that's a really big area that is going to expand is search and rescue and fire. Those huge areas, big swaths of land that we won't know if a fire started except when we see the smoke. And if you properly outfit an unmanned vehicle that's rugged enough to go in that terrain, you could not only detect that heat signature coming up way before a human would sense it, but they have these basically big fire extinguishers now that use air to blow out that first fire. So you can imagine the acreage that could be saved by sending an unmanned drone. Essentially, it's a ground drone on a fire or a search and rescue mission.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I had a great conversation with Robin Murphy. She has done search and rescue research for many, many years. She was involved with the World Trade Center and Fukushima and other tragedies like that, and trying to see how this technology can assist. But like I was just watching a recent documentary about, Katrina as just an example, and the aftermath, or just what happened there, and just thinking about, ground vehicles getting as close as they could to a water edge and then launching drones out, like, because they were using helicopters back then. I guess this was 2004 or 5. Mm-hmm. But like launching drones to go out and see where people are so that you can, send boats and people to go rescue these people. Mm-hmm. Just seems like it's at our fingertips. We can do this now. The technology is there.
It is.
And but getting it robust and making it work well, because one of the things that Robin mentioned is, they have some of these situations where there's a search and rescue operation, and you have all these different groups trying to fly drones around, and they're not coordinated, and the drones fail, and it becomes an impediment to some extent to the operation. So it has to be coordinated and it has to be robust. But like the technology is there to save lives, and it's just like we've got to perfect that to make it. And I don't think it's very costly at scale. Right. Because of the technology involved. It's just, there's got to be sort of that impetus to do it. And that kind of goes back to to some extent, the policing lab and your mission. I mean, if you could just sort of, we didn't really talk about it, but what is the mission of the policing lab and the scope of what you all are looking to do?
So at the policing lab, our tagline essentially is smarter policing, fewer victims. So what we're trying to do is apply process and technology to help police departments reduce victimization in the community. And so that might be through systems or processes, like just getting better about your craft in terms of briefing people at roll call. It could be getting technology that many police departments don't have, just because the budgets are strained. So much of the policing budget is involved in personnel that they don't have money left over to do anything really innovative in technology. So we try to bring that to them. And what we want to do is take the few dollars that we have from philanthropy and grants to prove something will work. And that's what we're doing with this unmanned ground vehicle right now. The Police Unmanned Ground Vehicle, or PUG, is let's prove this thing. It's a risky thing for a company to do because there's a big capital investment. There's a lot of research that has to be done. But let's test it in real world environments and see, because I think the potential is huge. And there's no way for a police department to really do that in the day-to-day crime fight. And we also try to look at pain points in the department and see, where their data is lacking and clean all of that up, because many times the police are not really informed consumers when it comes to technology. And so what happens is they get a system in, and through the procurement process, it'll take them 2 years to get that. They'll implement it, but they never really have the ability to maximize it or to optimize their use of it. And they'll ask us for things sometimes like, I wish the technology would do X. And when our experts come in, who are experts on that same system, they say, well, no, that's already, you have that. You've had that the whole time. And so it's a matter of training people on how to use the technology in the best possible way.
Interesting. And I guess you've mentioned a couple of terms here and there, and I've tried to keep on top of them. You mentioned the SDSCs, I guess that's Strategic Decision Support Center.
Yes.
And then real-time crime centers. What are those, and what's the difference between them, if there is a difference?
Yeah, so there is a difference. It's interesting that you should say that, because many times people who are experts on this are not recognizing the difference. So a real-time crime center is a centralized hub of information at a police department that's taking in information from sensors, from cameras, from the radio, listening to the police radio. And they have people there who are experts in, finding information out for the responding officers in real time. So, for instance, if someone's responding to a domestic violence call, the call goes out, real-time crime center picks that up. They'll start looking to see, do I have any information about that location or the people that live there? And they may find out, in fact, we've been there 4 times in the last 2 weeks. And last time we arrested this person, they fought with the police. That's great information for an officer to know heading in. And the ability of using drones from a real-time crime center has just expanded this exponentially, because now I'm responding to a shooting at an intersection at a gas station. And before I get there, I can see what's going on. I can see where suspects are fleeing to. I can see potentially a suspect vehicle, and then I can get that information out through the real-time crime center. I see a white vehicle, white Mustang fleeing the location. We pick up a partial plate, and now the real-time crime center can start looking at other video feeds and license plate recognition cameras and start tracking that suspect. And why it's important is not just to apprehend somebody, but we've seen many instances where someone is shot in that vehicle and bleeding out, and had the drone not gotten over top of them and directed police in, they would not have gotten medical attention, for instance. So a lot of applications for real-time crime. So that's what they do. And they also help on the investigation side after the fact to pull together video. It's amazing things that you can do with BriefCam and other software packages to pull together a lot of different video to show what happened in an incident. What's different about a strategic decision support center is it's not the centralized hub. They're more spokes on the wheel. So out in the district, you'll have headquarters, and then you'll have maybe 3 to 10 districts out there. In Chicago, we built 22. So every district had a strategic decision support center. it's like a situation room. Everybody is coming in and going out and talking about today's crime, and that's really how we get on top of it. And so that's kind of the main difference. Not a mini real-time crime center. It's much more focused on what can we prepare to do today to get ahead of our crime problem.
Wow. I mean, so, and you did some work on the National Real-Time Center Crime Center Toolkit with the Bureau of Justice, I guess, assistance. And I guess what was that, and who are they? Yeah. I guess for everybody.
So the Department of Justice has the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the goal of the Bureau of Justice Assistance is to help state and local law enforcement to do their job better. And they give out grants, and they put programs together like the Public Safety Partnership. So every year there are another 10 or 15 agencies that are brought into the Public Safety Partnership. And what they're done is they're paired up with an experienced chief who is a strategic site liaison, and the assessments are done of their crime fighting infrastructure, of their community relations, of their technology, with some of the finest experts throughout the country. And it's really made a huge difference. There are now dozens and dozens of agencies that have had this 3-year program, and it's really changed the course of policing in the United States through BJA and the Public Safety Partnership. I'm biased. I've been involved with them since LAPD. I was one of the first smart policing sites, and I stuck with them. And now I'm the strategic site liaison for Tampa. And Tampa's doing great things with technology and with crime reduction out there. Chief Burkaw is. So that's what the Bureau of Justice Assistance does. Another program is they go out and do research on what's happening in policing. And so I had a project. I was a research fellow for them, and we went out. We studied what's happening in real-time crime centers throughout the country. We had said we were going to go to 20 of them. The interest among real-time crime centers, they all want to show you what they can do. We ended up going to 45. So we had a great swath of them. They have a National Real-Time Crime Center Association now that has a conference every year, and they've got thousands of members. And so we went out, we looked at the cross-section, some big agencies, some small ones, and we created this toolkit for an agency, that wanted to start one, and you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of information out there. So that's available through BJA. And that's really where the police unmanned ground vehicle idea started. Is I was out in San Francisco, as I had mentioned, kept seeing these robo-taxis go by, and not one or two, but 5, 6, 10.
Yeah.
And then we saw a police car go by, and it was just kind of an aha moment, like, okay, why don't we have robo police cars? Like, people are afraid of that. I wouldn't want to call it that, but why don't we have vehicles like the robo-taxi, like a Waymo, that is outfitted with cameras and with sensors that we can assign missions to, and that mission could be presence. Just putting police presence into a neighborhood. And if you think about it, it's a less escalating way of having police presence, because if you have officers in the vehicle, they're going to make stops, which there's a role for that. But I just like the presence, someone knowing, okay, there is someone monitoring what's happening here. I think it makes people feel better. It makes retailers feel better. And that's kind of what the origin story of the police unmanned ground vehicle was, or the PUG. And we just call it the PUG because I think that's more fun and not one of these aggressive names like Viper or something that you hear. That's not what this is about. People name a specialized unit Scorpion, and then they're surprised that they have a culture that goes wrong.
Yeah. Hellfire wouldn't be a good name.
Exactly. No, you have to have something like PUG is approachable. And so when I was telling you earlier, when we launch this vehicle, we'll have a pug dog at the launch. The dog gets more attention than the technology, But I do think it's a way of breaking down. You could do fun things then with, giving out giveaways to kids when we expose it to the community. I think the kids are going to love this vehicle. There's ways to interact with it. We're building a kiosk essentially on the passenger side window, where people can go up and ask questions of the police. That's all an AI agent that's used there. We're working with Trulio on the digital assistant part, and I've known Anthony Tassone for some time. He's been a good partner, And so we're looking for ways, community-facing ways to use the police unmanned ground vehicle. I talked to a very good friend of mine, George Kalina, about this other day, and we were explaining how I like to have the information given to the officer as they're driving. So, we're driving now and GPS will say gas station here, there's a Starbucks there. This will tell us, hey, there was a burglary here. There was a robbery there. There was a shooting here. It's just information that I need to know as I'm driving through the environment. What Chief Colleen said was, well, what I'd like to see, Sean, is there was a burglary victim here and maybe need to check in on them. And I thought that was a totally different idea. Like, can you imagine the impact of a police officer that you don't know getting an alert in the vehicle as they drive by your business or home, and they just check in with you. They see you outside, or they go knock on the door and say, hey, listen, I realize you were burglarized, 2 nights ago. Was everything all right? How do you guys feel? Were you able to secure things? The feeling of security and the reduction in the fear of crime that you get from that is more dramatic than any kind of crime reduction in some ways.
Yeah. And it's thinking of the problem, sometimes I think of, just given what I do, think of like I try to abstract a model of a situation, and then you just look at situations where there's bad people, crimes being committed, and vehicles and technology that can be now more mobile, whereas it might have been more fixed as terms of fixed cameras. You have more mobile, flying cameras, drones, and ground vehicles and what have you. And the applications go far beyond, big cities, as we already kind of touched on. Campus security, getting, women and just anybody home safely at night, and making sure they get to their dorm room, right? I just think of some of the more recent events and the preventability of it, maybe with more of this technology, again, it being robust and coordinated. These are all things that from a technology perspective are doable.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on some of those other applications like campus and other applications?
Well, this is the thing. I think when we first started talking, it must have been 18 months ago, and I thought I was going to have to convince you about this use case, and you were already on it, and you're like, no, it's ready. It's ready to go. We just need somebody that has, vertical penetration into that market, because people are afraid of it, and I think what's happened is people are overestimating the risk involved. And I just saw a quote from Bezos the other day. They asked him, hey, how are you able to have the confidence to build your business that large? And he said, well, I think that most people, the human element is to overestimate risk and to underestimate opportunity. And I think that's happening right now when it comes to technology and policing. I believe they overestimate the risk. And by doing that, they're missing out on the benefits and the opportunities of pushing the envelope. And that's one of the things that Policing Lab can do. Let's get in there. Let's experiment with these things in different areas. So one of the things you brought up immediately when we talked was campus security. And, I have 2 daughters who were just finished college. And this scenario of, studying at the library late into the evening and needing to get home, many campuses have students or other people that you can call a shuttle and it'll get you home. What I like about the potential of using an autonomous vehicle, and what I mean there is you would introduce me to the folks that have the GEM E6, the Wave people. I love that platform. GEM E6, 6 passengers. It's a shuttle. You can turn that into a campus security shuttle. And what it gets you, besides just the mobility, is that we put sensors on there, we put cameras on there, we do a 2-way communications to the police department. And that way, when someone hails that vehicle on an app to come to the library, take them back to their dorm, it's not just that they're driving with another student or with a security officer, they're connected right to the police department. And they're in this kind of halo of security. And when they get to their dorm, instead of somebody just driving away, I would like them to have control over the vehicle from the app So then when my daughter gets into her dorm room and make sure she's secure with all the things that I've taught her as a police officer over the years, then she can release the vehicle, So there's a visible presence there. If someone's lurking in an alleyway that she has to walk through, that's all lit up and there's police lights, and the suspect's not going to deal with that. And then when he or she is comfortable inside their safe environment, that's when they release the vehicle. So
that's great.
And then on off hours, when this thing is not responding to pick people up, it's your observer out there looking at conditions throughout campus. And why are there people walking? Why are there people, why is this door ajar? Why are these lights out? So things that you don't have access to in anomaly detection, you could use that GEM E6 during the off hours. And I love the idea of having a couple of these on campus where you could coordinate their movements. You could say, oh, I know from my algorithm that classes let out at this part of campus at a certain time. So I'm going to send my assets over there during that time. So you get maximum use of your mobility resources, and you're getting a security blanket. And I know that Alex Cassis at the Florida International University, he's the chief of police, very forward thinking on these things. And I think we may enter into agreement to experiment with some of those things if it gets approved. So I think campus is a great application.
Yeah, and keeping it, keeping the, choosing lower cost, more economical vehicle platforms, like, electric too, that can drive indoors, like the GEM. There's the GEM E2, which is just a 2-seater. It's a very economical, highly capable ground platform. It can go 25 miles per hour. It can carry, drones as well. I mean, again, obviously there was the recent, tragedy at Utah with Charlie Kirk and what transpired there. But and then, I'm here in Virginia where there was a tragedy at the Virginia Tech School. So these, not just, shootings on college campuses, but I think about applications with other, school shootings, in non-collegiate environments. And having vehicles, like, it's sort of this layered approach. You can have vehicles patrolling around outside. You can have something indoors. You could have some non-lethal, deterrence for certainly cameras and things that could disrupt and discourage a shooter, right? Mace. I don't know what you would put on these.
What's
vehicles.
Interesting is that I've talked to some folks. So I got Ed Prokop on my team. He's the former LAPD SWAT commander. I've talked to him about some of these things, countermeasures on the vehicle or less lethal on the vehicle. And you would think Ed, with his background, would be all for that. He was not. He was like, no, I'm not sure we want to do it, because you still need to have a human in the loop before you deploy something like that. And there's ways of doing it. You could alert a human, but you want to warn somebody too. I mean, so there are some issues about that, but certainly the scenario that I like for a campus is to have a GEM E6 that is moving people around, that has a camera on it, that has drone launch capability. So if you have a speaker coming, rooftops can be checked. You have one that is marked up as a Ford Explorer, so that we have visible deterrence in that, and you can platoon these vehicles. So you could get a Polaris. You and I have talked a lot about that Polaris Ranger, and that I know you've done one already. Mm-hmm. I like the security blanket, I call it, for a campus. You'd have one GEM E6 or two. You'd have a police Ford Explorer, and you'd have the Polaris. And now I'm covered all my bases. I have a low-speed vehicle that can pick people up and get them home. I have a police vehicle that can provide visible deterrence and situational awareness back to a command post. And I have an off-road vehicle that can cover quads and in between dorm buildings and things. And that, I think, if you had those calibrated the right way and you had the right policies in place on a campus, that would improve your readiness for a critical incident, but it would also reassure parents and students that they were in a safe environment, and you'd have a lot more information in terms of what's happening on campus in terms of security, and maybe head off some security threats, like this idea of a building being left open. We know in school shooter situations, we've had that happen. They're checking doors to see if they're locked. In this most recent one, the practice was to lock the doors of the church during a service, and that saved lives. And in another incident, the door was left ajar, and that's how the shooter gained access. And I think you and I have talked. There's all kinds of systems now with interior drones that fascinate me for schools. You could really set this up so that you have the perimeter covered outside, and if something happens, drones drop from the ceiling and are able to locate where that suspect is. The other thing is using the LiDAR to build a 3D digital twin. I have a partner, Marlene Brugling, who's like an expert in AI, and she's talking about building a digital twin of some of these environments to give us a better location on a shooter in those situations. And unmanned, we all have Lenco heavy armored vehicles or armor that can go up, but I like the idea of sending an unmanned vehicle up there to get eyes on where the suspect is and give me overwatch capabilities. And in that scenario, let's say we have a school shooting, you have an officer respond, that officer goes down. Normally, to rescue that officer is a big operation. We got to put people in a vehicle. We have to go get armor to do it. I like to drive an unmanned vehicle in there, put that vehicle between the shooter and the downed officer, and let them either self-rescue by climbing in there, or we send somebody out in the unmanned vehicle to pull them in. So a lot of applications for school shootings, both to head off the threat, but also respond to the threat and get the most intelligence that we can without putting officers in harm's way.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about like the, not just drones inside? So on the inside perimeter of the building or at the door, at the entrances of these buildings, also small ground-based robotics. And when I say non-lethal, it doesn't necessarily mean like it would be certainly an automated decision. It would be, teleoperated and it might be just flashing lights to distract or sounds or with some remote, officer or teleoperation releasing of, a bad, smell or mace or something like that, something to disrupt.
You know what, Paul? I think that's the right way to think about it, is like creating disruption. And so, you know what it is? I misread what you meant by that, because less lethal means something different to me. But this idea of, people talk about, well, once they know it's unmanned, people are going to attack the vehicle. Well, there's a way to distract people with sound, with an LRAD, the long range acoustic device.
Yeah.
It's very good at giving direction, but it also has a warning tone that you don't want to stand there. And that's not even to the level of less lethal. I like this idea of, I talked to my brother about this, of using that LRAD to throw sound that you can have approaching officers, approaching sirens. To put up a drone is distracting to people. To put smoke out is distracting to people. This idea of an odor is a good one. There's also ways to put a tag out. So you could put out a liquid from the vehicle and tag somebody with an RFID or something if they were damaging the vehicle. There's a lot of things that you could do that don't rise to the level of force, but certainly you'd have to have guardrails in place. And I think your guardrail of none of that happens without a human in the decision-making process is probably the most important.
Yeah, I mean, it just, they can't be there at that instant, but the robot's there and through remote secured and safe remote teleoperation. I mean, you have exploding bags of money, right? Where it releases paint and things like that. And it's going to be hard for them to not be visible at that point if they're fleeing a building. I mean,
that's a great one. That's developed over the years into something that's, so ubiquitous in bank security and things. I think, this is why I like talking with you, Paul, because you can bring things in from other industries into policing that really do make sense and make those connections. So I always learn something when we have these discussions.
You think of, banks having this technology that where there's an exploding packet of paint or whatever, But children are society's maybe most precious asset, and why not have something like that in these schools to deter and distract and make just incredibly difficult the situations for these shooters. You'd certainly have cameras trained on them. You'd have remote control and capability of being able to deal with it. If these schools can't have officers in the schools, which I know most schools are not doing or they don't like doing,
Right.
for whatever reason. But you could have these robotic platforms and there and non-threatening, but just there on the ready at every door,
Well,
and at every location. And
I think there's something to that. I think that this idea that you bring up of disruption and distraction, you want, so the person's in a high stress situation already, and you want to make it more complicated for them to execute their mission. So let's distract them in any way that we can. When we're doing breaches into places, we'll break a window, we'll throw a flashbang, we'll do things to disrupt that person's thought pattern so that we're able to get the advantage. And I don't see why you wouldn't do that in this situation. I mean, I don't know the name of the vendor, but you'll see online there's video of these indoor drones. And basically one thing in the school is they're small enough to drop out of the ceiling and fly around the school. And in the case of a school shooter, a drone flying at them or two drones flying at them is certainly going to disrupt their activity and not let them, carry out their plan. And the same thing with an unmanned ground vehicle. Maybe it's disrupting them. I can think of situations like the attempt on the president on the golf course. That person was sitting in a sniper's nest for a period of hours. If you had a police unmanned ground vehicle out there that can pick up on heat signature, that person on a perimeter check would have been identified.
Absolutely.
And so let's figure out ways to disrupt this planning. Let's figure out ways to disrupt the execution of their plans. And like you said, these could be very low impact things, but they're disruptive to the criminal activity. And it really fits in well with our whole philosophy at Policing Lab, which is let's disrupt criminal activity so that the suspect opts out. That's all we're trying to do, is create a condition where the suspect says, you know what, I saw the police are in the area. This is not a night for me to be out here capering. And if you do that enough times with enough suspects throughout the week, you will see crime go down considerably. And there's been no arrest, and there's been no violation of civil rights, and there's been no escalation. It's presence reducing crime and disrupting crime.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess building trust is important, obviously, with innovation. Not just trust that it's going to be used correctly, but trust that it works well. I know there were early stories of uses of some of these robotic platforms by the military that it took 3 people to operate one of these robots. It's since advanced and gotten better, but the overhead was high and you couldn't really carry it around easily. And then sometimes it would break down, and you can't afford that. When you're in these high stress situations, obviously it's just got to work. Right. And so it seems they have to be robust, and it just goes back to coordination and as well. And where do you see sort of, generative AI is a hot topic across all industries. The ability to not just generate text and images and video, but now being applied. We use it to generate certain aspects of code and verification methodologies. Where do you see, if at all, this being applied in the world of policing, and maybe as it relates to some of the automation activities?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see with generative AI is more ways for people to interact with the police. And when you think about customer service, people are used to a certain level of customer service now based on the way Apple and others have developed and we're trying to figure out ways to get feedback on the service, and we're trying to give people options. So if you think about it, if you're a Gen Z and you get your car broken into, for instance, you can get Safelite to come out on an app, and when they're getting there. You can call your work and say, hey, I'm going to be late. Or if you're working from home, you can tell your Zoom call people you're going to be late. You can send in insurance pictures of it to start an insurance claim. About the only wild card you have is, when are the police going to come to take this report? And that's not just burglary for motor vehicles, any report. I think we need to give the consumer different ways. So wouldn't it be great if we had an app that they could talk to, an avatar or even just a chat bot, and say, how do you want to handle this? Do you want a police officer to come out there? Do you want to come to the station? If you do, here's where you can come. Do you want me to roll the unmanned ground vehicle over there so you can fill out this in a kiosk? Let's give them options, and then let's ask for their feedback. And I think most people are used to dealing with companies and getting a warm handshake. The biggest complaint people have about the police is, I can't get a report number. Insurance needs this report and I can't get it. Well, all of that can be handled via AI agents. There's no reason to have humans involved in that, and it'd be quicker for people. And I think they'd feel better about it if they fill out a report on a kiosk on the police unmanned ground vehicle, and then they get a text to their phone saying, okay, here's your report number and here's what you need to do next. And then we put that in a queue for a detective to call automatically. Or if there's things missing in a report, you could have them get on the chat bot and answer those questions. So I think that's where generative AI is going to come in. It's also going to help us with the briefing through Crime Central that I described. That is a system where AI agents all the way along that process are gathering information, analyzing it, writing a script, and then producing a video with an avatar that is not a person, that delivers the content in a way that police can absorb it. And there's different modes of that. You could do it via podcast. You could do it for people who want to look it up. They could bring it up. But all of that is generated by the AI and frees up the time for a human analyst to do other things, to look at larger patterns, to interact with detectives and officers. And so I think we're going to free up a lot of time. We're going to be able to get much more precise and timely on our crime information. And that's what's going to continue to drive crime down.
Yeah. Interesting. My son just yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, just got these new glasses from Ray-Ban with the Meta. They're the Meta glasses, and despite the fact that he looks like Buddy Holly with them on, which I think is great because I love Buddy Holly. He loves these glasses because you can ask, you can say, hey, Meta AI, tell me about this landmark, and it's got a camera, it's got recording. And so it just dawns on me, obviously, this is just the first step. It's doing very basic stuff, with augmented reality too. And I'm thinking, well, just as we're talking, like this is going to be something that folks in the police force would be using. It's got the generative AI built into it. It can tell you, you're in an area, and if you're hooked into something, I mean, Grok has pretty real-time AI feeds from what's happening on X, right? Like crime and whatever, an incident can all be streamed instantly and to this device that's on just a pair of sunglasses that are on their head, and telling them, where an incident is. If you encounter somebody that may look like the suspect, it's all very, obviously there's some scary implications of it, I'm sure, for some people, but as the technology gets perfected, it's inevitable that this is going to happen, and that this technology will be there for officers as well as anybody. What are your have you thought about some of those applications and things that are coming?
Yeah, well, I think that you're exactly right that, what may end up happening, we talk about a heads-up display for augmented reality in the vehicle, right? That may be overcome by events if these goggles and these eyeglasses get better, because what do I do when I'm outside the vehicle? I need to have some kind of device. So as we're watching that, and I know at FIU, actually, they have a robotics lab there, and there are students that are writing their dissertations and things and studying how all the different uses you can have and they're studying different types of, augmented reality glasses and things. So I think if we get in with a university like that and we start showing applications, it doesn't hurt. People get worried about it, but the only difference in putting information on the glasses or on a windshield from what we're doing now is officers are, right now what's happening is a human analyst is spending days and hours to come up with information to get to an officer, which may or may never get to him in roll call. We're fixing that. They're taking notes in a little officer's notebook or on their phones now. They're taking notes probably in roll call. They have to refer to those notes or something. All you're doing is putting it right in front of the decision maker. So instead of having to pull this out of their pocket and say, hey, I heard something about this area when I was in roll call, let me look it up. In terms of officer safety, it's much better to have it here and your hands are free and I'm not messing with a device and I'm getting information that I could pull off my clipboard that has a be on the lookout or that I could pull out of my officer's notebook. It's just being presented to me as a visual in the glasses. So I think there's great potential for that. I think with all things, like with the police unmanned ground vehicle, with the Crime Central technology, what we're doing is we're spending a lot of time with end users on the front end, both in the community and in the police department. And I think that, the sheriff of Miami-Dade County, Rosie Cordero Stutz, should be commended for her leadership role. It's courageous of her to take this on, this kind of innovation, but also she's making smart decisions about where and how we roll this out. And the first thing we're going to do is it's going to spend the first at least 6 months with Community Affairs Group. And so that I thought was a great decision. If you just roll this right out into operations, people don't know how it works. People might be concerned about it. We have to be totally transparent. And I think that's the best way to do it. So indefinitely now it's going to be in community affairs. We're going to be testing all of these things with officers. And I think you'd have to do the same thing with anything. Like if you did go to the glasses, you'd have to have a period of 6 months or so where you work with that end user to make sure they're getting what they want, that it's safe for them, and that it's not violating any kind of civil rights. But that's just through testing, and it's a necessary thing. People want to jump in, start using this technology right away. I can tell you from personal experience, I wish I had waited sometimes to get more input from the community before I jumped into something that I thought was exciting. And we're being much more considerate about that now. And a lot of that has to do with two things. One is the sheriff's leadership and also people on my team. I have my partner, Tony Grubasek, is a former FBI agent and very good on technology, has a computer science degree. And he's always putting that as the first thing. Let's make sure we're transparent. Let's make sure it works for the end user. And so I'm very fortunate to have people like that on the team. So we do this the right way the first time.
Yeah. It's because it's hard to rebuild trust once it's,
Oh yeah.
It hasn't worked right. And then, you're set back further than you might otherwise be. So that makes sense.
And you know what, Paul, sometimes it's not intentional. Sometimes the police are not doing this in some nefarious way. They're trying to get better at their game. And so they'll put a system up. I know one city put up a surveillance plane for a period of time, and they were capturing information. Like in Iraq, they used it to go back to bomb factories. The idea here was to identify where shooters were coming from, but they had neglected to tell the city that was happening. And, it took them a decade or more to get that trust back, because, and it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like we're going to try to keep this from you.
Sure.
But, people don't believe that in the end. They're like, you're trying to get away with something. So we learn from those experiences that we see out there in the industry.
Right. Well, where do you, I guess, looking ahead a little bit here, where do you see kind of policing in 10 years with AI and the autonomy and the real-time analytics that we're kind of dabbling with here today?
Yeah, so I think we can look at other, other cases like drones, for instance, is a good analogy. There were 10 years ago or more now, probably more than 10 years ago, LAPD was donated 2 drones from the fire department, and we tried to implement them, and people were outraged. They like, how dare you be surveilling us? And so since then, so many cameras have come online. Chicago, last time I checked, had 30,000 cameras. London is wired up like unbelievable, and people are being surveilled, not so much by police or by the government, but what they're being surveilled by is in private industry, and they're giving them the permission to do it. So that's the thing. I mean, people don't realize how many times they're captured on a private or camera throughout the day. And so the challenge becomes, how do we get people used to that? And how do we get people to accept that that's happening? And how can we leverage that to make them safer? So I think all of these things with generative AI and with autonomy, we can look to other cases and see how drones were not at all accepted, and now they're very much accepted. And I think it's that same calculation that humans have, is we tend, for survival purposes, to overestimate the risk, and to think of all the things that can go wrong. And it's important to do that. It's important to get out in front of it, but not to let it hold you up to the point where you're not going to innovate. And so that balance, I think, is something that police leaders have to constantly struggle with, because of the very high risks to the public trust and to people in general. And what I see that is good news is that I deal with a lot of police leaders, and they're very much aware of that. And that wasn't the case 10, 20 years ago. They were just doing their thing. And now they're much more, like in Miami, Armando Aguilar is an assistant chief there. And we work with Miami, and they had a facial recognition program some years ago. And the first people they talked to was the ACLU. And now Miami is called upon a lot of times to weigh in on how do we implement AI in policing. And there's a lot of experts out there on ethics that we consult with. And I think that that's what has to be done. People have to be informed about what the technology can do and the risks of it. And you can't be afraid of losing that edge of the technology by exposing it to people, because you're going to lose it eventually anyway in a bad way. If you try to introduce something that people don't know about, and you don't get the right input, that's going to get killed eventually anyway, and you're going to lose that tool. So you better hear about it on the front end. And what I find is when you explain the intention behind it, even when I talk to civil rights leaders, what they tell me most often is, okay, Sean, I believe you. I believe your intention of how you're going to use this technology. How do we control that for everyone else? And that becomes the issue. I can convince them one-on-one that I'm not using this in a way to deny people their civil rights. But can it be used that way? And what guardrails can we put in to make sure it's not used that way? And I think that's a big challenge. But look, I see much more opportunity in using technology than I see risk. And I think we have to be optimistic about it too. And that's why I like working with Perrone Robotics, is because whenever we come up with a problem, you guys are very thorough about how to solve that problem, but you're never like, oh, can't be done. It's always like, yeah, this is what I see from Paul. Yes, I can see him thinking of already how it's going to get solved. And then, you go into a process of solving it. But, you have to be optimistic. And I think you're an optimistic person, and I'm an optimistic person. And we have to let that lead, or we're never going to get anywhere.
Well, appreciate that. And there's always a path to a solution, but what are the steps, right? Something is doable, but there's phases and steps to get there to make it practical. Like, what are the steps to get there, in your opinion?
So I think we have a very big first step, which is we conceived of this last June, and through your help and the help of some others, primarily Tony Grubasek, being on the ground in the garage with people putting the ISR stack on, and with your people, with Nick and others, we were able to, in 1 year, really go from a concept, buying a 2022 Ford Explorer, and then, working with you to outfit it. And in 1 year, we were able to come up with a working, not just a concept and a PowerPoint, but an actual working vehicle. And then very soon after that, we had a major police department or sheriff's department, Miami-Dade, willing to go into pilot testing with us. And what I'd like to see happen is to get each one of these platforms. We get the Ford Explorer going in Miami-Dade. Then I've probably got, there's probably 10 agencies right now that would like to do this. It's very expensive to do right now, but I think the cost is going to come down, right? As we talked about, like if we're doing 10 of them, those individual bills will be less. And then we'll get 10 of them out there in different settings. And then but while that's happening, some of the components should get cheaper and some of the technology should get easier to replicate. And then you guys do the testing. And what I thought was remarkable is when we took this vehicle back for safety testing to Perrone, I checked in with Nick and I said, how are we doing on the testing? And he goes, no, we're good. We got 150 of them done. And I was like, well, how many are there? And there were over 450 safety checks that were being done after you had already done them, just a few months prior. So that gives me a lot of confidence when I talk to chiefs. And I'm convinced of the technology. When you have the robustness of LiDAR, radar, visual, and GPS all together, I really think that that's a rock solid way of doing it. And then the way that Perrone operates, how safety conscious you are, I'm very much confident that when you say you can run this vehicle at 35 miles an hour, we can. And by the way, we're really not going to be running it at that speed unless we're going from point A to point B. A patrol speed is sub 10 miles an hour if you're really doing a good job. So 10 miles an hour is very safe. And that's really the bulk of what we're going to be doing. And like you said, if we're doing an enclosed course, I have even less concern about that. And fortunately, we do have some departments that are going to let us work with them to let this patrol parks and to patrol parking lots and other places where we can kind of test out both the ISR stack and the autonomy.
Yeah. Well, that's sounds like a great path forward. And I think back to it was almost exactly 20 years ago. I was in the Mojave Desert behind Wild Bill's Casino in what was that, Barstow?
Yeah, Barstow.
I think, California. Yeah, because it was right after the Grand Challenge, and I had gotten in our vehicle, Tommy, and just because we were out in the desert and we could do it, I sat in the driver's seat, hands off, but I let it take me 80, I think it was over 80 miles an hour on a straight path just to see if it could be done. I was, very much in test pilot mode back in the day. I was a little younger.
Yeah, not everybody would do that.
No, it was very early days stuff. But certainly nowadays, that's why, we started out going faster and we were doing on-road vehicles in the UK and in the US at 55, 65. But at some point we're like, hey, we can go, we can put this into, production capacity, 25, 35, 45 mile an hour applications now. So, and save lives and do the things that you're doing. And, it's a huge pleasure to be working with you and your team. And I just like to end these things with getting your sort of final thought on if you could send one message to police chiefs and policymakers about adopting this innovation based on sort of your experiences to date. What would it be? What would be your one sort of message?
Well, for now, I just need the police chiefs to be open to the idea of experimenting with this, realizing that it could help us to do a better job. It could help us to make the officers safer. It could help in a community to make the people who live there feel safer. And it could give us a lot more information about what's going on in the environment and what risks are out there in real time. And I just need those chiefs to be open to piloting these things because I do think there's a lot of promise in it. And I think that if we don't continue to innovate, we're going to stagnate, and we're going to have to always think of the next thing, because crime is going to continue to happen, and people are going to continue to be victimized if we don't lean into innovation, because the criminals are leaning into innovation. And so we have to figure out ways to disrupt that activity. And I think a lot of that is going to, in the coming years, going to have to do with autonomy and mobility and with generative AI. And so instead of being afraid of it and thinking of all the risks, and there are risks, and we have to contemplate those risks, but let's not let that hold us back. There's nothing that we can't do. We get into this thing and we experiment with it. And look, we're not in a money making venture, so I'm willing to admit if it doesn't work. So if I put it into an environment in a campus and they say, oh, this isn't working for us, I'm not going to continue trying to sell that thing. We're going to do the problem solving approach, say, why isn't it working? What could work? And we won't even know until we talk to the people in that environment. What are the students comfortable with? What do the police officers think of it? They'll tell you straight out. If you get them in a focus group, they'll tell you everything that's wrong with the technology. But we had to do that on the front end. So all I'm looking for now is for chiefs to say, you know what? I trust Policing Lab. We've got a good track record of helping people reduce crime. Let's get in there and try to experiment and just trust me that I have the both the policing and your agency, as my primary focus, making that successful. So I think if we can have the kind of relationship, that Perrone and Policing Lab has with some of these police departments, then we're gonna make a lot of progress in the next few years.
Well, I appreciate it, Sean. This has been an amazing conversation. Definitely a lot of new concepts and an application that I don't think a lot of people think of often enough, I guess, with automation today. And what has once been sort of a science fiction view of this technology for policing. I mean, the real applications, the real benefits for making communities safer, force protection, and everything, I think is clearly there. And it's great that the Policing Lab is and you are doing what you're doing, and we're just happy to be along, working alongside you on this. And appreciate your time here today talking about all of that and more.
Yeah.
So,
well, and Paul, I'm excited. Thank you for your partnership, and really excited about this launch that we have coming up October 1st. And about the time this drops, we'll likely be seeing a lot of activity. I would think in the media, there should be media attention brought to this. And I think that that's going to make people much more comfortable. The more they see the robo-taxis, the more they hear about it on the news, I think that's going to make people more comfortable with the technology. And we're just so happy to be working with one of the founders of autonomous technology on this project, going all the way back to the original challenge 20-something years ago. So thanks for having me on. I had a great time.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sean. Good talking.
All right, good talking to you. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web, and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.